The Denver Broncos wrapped up day one of mandatory minicamp on Tuesday, and plenty of wide receivers got their chance to mix in with Broncos quarterback Bo Nix. We'll recap the day and highlight standouts on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Broncos Country? Welcome into another episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. For all your Broncos news, content coverage, analysis, and more, make sure you're an everydayer by subscribing or following wherever you get your podcasts. And a special shout out and thank you to everyone in Broncos Country, all the everydayers. Thanks for making us your first listen, however you choose to do so. I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports, where you can check out my written work daily over at milehighsports.com.
And I'm Sayre Bedinger, the site expert at predominantlyorange.com, where you can find my written work every single day as well.
Here's what you're going to get on today's episode show. Broncos Country, Tuesday, Denver wrapped up their first mandatory minicamp practice. We saw a wide variety of things, and now this morning will be day two of mandatory minicamp, where we're going to have complete coverage and a bonus episode from Sayre and myself as we react to it as well. But we're going to go through, obviously, some day one highlights here that saw the Broncos getting plenty of work. When they talk about the wide receiver depth and all those guys in that room, those guys were getting work with Bo Nix and Jarrett Stidham and Sam Ehlinger at an extensive rate during the first mandatory minicamp practice. We'll go over that. Plus, Jaleel McLaughlin continues to perform with a chip on his shoulder even after the Broncos have added J.K. Dobbins into the mix. We'll take a look at what we saw on day one from Jaleel, and we'll highlight some minicamp standouts from day one, including an undrafted rookie wide receiver who redeemed himself later on in practice. Sayre, look, obviously, the Broncos, they're back on the football field. The weather is great. Things are cooking and rolling. I'm getting sunburnt to no end at Broncos camp. And, once again, we got 2 more days of practice, beating with day 2 here today. Day one, it was scorching. It was hot out there. And you got to see a lot of mixing and matching here once again with the Broncos offense and defense. Sean Payton platooning guys, rotating in a ton of guys at skill player positions, offensive line, just so they can maximize reps to carry over what they've gone through at install. But I would say the one thing that we saw on a day where there was no Levelle Bailey, it was very interesting. We'll obviously dive into that a little bit later on here on today's show, but a ton of wide receivers getting reps with Bo Nix. We're talking about Courtney Jackson, an undrafted guy, Jerwan Newton, talking about Pat Bryant, Troy Franklin, Marvin Mims, Cortland Sutton, Evan Ingram, Lucas Kroll, a ton of guys getting in the mix here with Bo, which, I think is a great sign early on.
And I think I heard too, Cody, that even one of the Colorado wide receivers is out there getting a look from the Broncos at minicamp right now. So that's exciting as well. You have to remind me his name because
Will Shepherd.
Will Shepherd. Okay. Sorry to all the Colorado Buffs fans out there. So go ahead.
He was wearing number 87 too, which happened to be A.T. Perry's number. And Sayre, once again, no A.T. Perry. And the fact that his number is now on Will Shepherd, who is a tryout player, I think there's something going on. I don't know for sure, but my understanding or the vibe or the rumor right now is that A.T. Perry suffered some sort of injury. I'm not sure if that's the case. Waiting for confirmation on that, obviously, but that's something that we have heard, which would make sense, potentially an injury settlement maybe coming his way. We'll see, but waiting to figure out what the true prognosis is there. But Will Shepherd now donning A.T. Perry's number.
That would make a lot of sense, wouldn't it? Why they're bringing in more guys for tryouts too. So obviously wishing him the best, whatever the situation and circumstance is there. But like you mentioned, rotating a lot of guys at wide receiver, a lot of opportunity to get into the rotation this year and build chemistry. I mean, the absence of Levelle Bailey is kind of a big deal, Cody, because from the sounds of things, it sounds like he's really had a standout offseason program thus far. He's building more and more trust with Bo Nix, but that seems to be the case with a number of different guys, right? These guys are out there. Bo is operating the offense at a much higher level than he was as a rookie. Obviously, he's no longer splitting reps with Jarrett Stidham and Zach Wilson, and they're not doing this, competition sort of deal. So you're able to get these guys better looks with your top offense because you have a solidified guy in the QB1 chair, and he's able to distribute the ball to all these different players. So I think building that chemistry, getting all these guys reps with the first team offense, even getting, fair looks at that undrafted class, because that's the best way that you can get these guys really, hey, to say, we're going to make sure that if we send you out of the building, we're confident in doing so, because Sean Payton hates that when he has to send guys out of the building and they go thrive elsewhere. He wants them to thrive in Denver if possible. The best way to do that, get those guys looks with the first team.
Peyton is very much a guy who will leave every stone, what is it? Is you don't want to leave any stone unturned, essentially. Like he'll flip over every stone, every rock, essentially, to figure out what that volume looks like. And look, there are, receivers getting involved left and right. I think obviously the main storyline here is that connection between Courtland Sutton and Bo Nix continues to thrive here. I mean, this was something that, that is truly Bo's security blanket. I mean, we're seeing a little bit more confidence, I think, in Bo Nix with his arm, taking shots downfield to guys like Courtland Sutton. I mean, Bo Nix is even connecting with guys like Jaleel McLaughlin. We'll highlight Jaleel a little bit later here, but you definitely see that comfort level with those guys. I know someone just recently called me out in the comments for saying comfortability. I like that word. I like creating new words here, but we'll do the same thing. So comfort level is increased here between those guys. Obviously, is a great sign. Now, in terms of Levelle Bailey, we asked Sean Payton after practice if there was any concern. He said, no, we're all good there. So hopefully the instance was Levelle had something come up. We'll see if he's here this morning for day 2 of mandatory minicamp. We'll have that obviously in our post-practice notes and our post-practice pod for all of you in Broncos country right now. But I want to highlight, obviously, guys like Pat Bryant. I think without Levelle Bailey being there, Pat Bryant getting a little bit more of an extensive look. Love what I'm seeing from him. I mean, this guy, great route runner, moves very fluidly. And I think the one thing the area I'm excited to see him the most carry over into competition against other players and other teams is contested catchability. I mean, he had a couple of tough catches on the day on Tuesday to open up mandatory minicamp. Jaleel Barron working inside, against him, and he did a really good job. Jaleel had a play on the ball, and Pat Bryant just got it. Tightly contested coverage. You're going to live with that as a DB, but you love to see that if you're Pat Bryant. This is a guy who can win those tough catches, and especially in traffic, which that was an area of struggle for the Broncos last season. I'm liking what I'm seeing from there. Courtney Jackson, though, Sayre, this was, one thing. Bo Nix was intercepted on the day by Jaquan McMillan. It was returned for a touchdown, or what would have been a touchdown here. But what had happened was Bo Nix threw a pass to Courtney Jackson, the undrafted guy, hit him in both of his hands, and the ball popped up, and it was intercepted by J-Mac, who did, the rest. And so that a mistake early on by Jackson, he finished strong on the day, though. He hauled in several catches from Jarrett Stidham, Sam Ehlinger, including a big-time touchdown. That obviously I think gave him a little bit of momentum. He shook off the bad start and he finished strongly. That's what you want to see. That's what Sean Payton wants to see with these guys, is how do they respond to adversity. Courtney Jackson is one of those guys that stood out, and he even stood out going back to obviously rookie minicamp just several weeks ago.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that these guys are going to have to clean up, because that's not going to help your case, right? When you're tipping the ball in the air and missing an opportunity like that, especially when it makes your quarterback look bad, because at this time of year, it's all about that built trust between the receiver and his quarterback. And so it's great to hear that Pat Bryant, though, Cody, is making those contested catches, the things that we saw him do extremely well at Illinois. And a lot of folks really concerned about, well, does he have the ability to separate at the NFL level? And it's like, well, you see him kind of create that separation in many different ways, whether that's creating separation with a good route, utilizing his, pacing as a route runner, and then obviously creating separation at the catch point with his hands, even, against a guy who's quite a bit faster in the 40 time. With Jaleel Barron running in the high 4.3s, right? So that's exactly what you want to see at this time of year, is those guys stepping up and making plays. You're not so worried about the undrafted players making mistakes, though, right? Because you want them to go out there and get those reps, get those opportunities to bounce back. You're not going to be perfect every single practice. And certainly the guys who played on Denver's active roster last year weren't perfect in that regard. We saw a lot of tipped passes from the receivers. We saw a lot of drop passes. So I think it's certainly something that these guys can bounce back from. They got plenty of time. They've got some talent, and they've got I think a lot of these wide receivers, Cody, that are competing for spots on this team, they've got a lot of special teams experience too. So going to be an interesting wrinkle to throw in at some point when the pads come on.
Yeah, and look, mandatory minicamp, OTAs, this is the time for, I would say like to go out there and make all your mistakes now, right? I don't want that to ever be a message, because we never, as a coaching staff, as a former coach, we never emphasize that. Like, obviously, we know mistakes are part of the process, but by the time training camp rolls around, you want those mistakes to be very, very minimal or rare at best from popping their heads out. And obviously seeing some of those trends. And maybe we're seeing with some of these younger guys early on throughout OTAs and minicamp. Jackson shaking that off is obviously a great sign. Special teams going to be a big factor here. And I think Denver's really going to look to vamp up their practice squad unit. Obviously, I think we already know the wide receiver room for the most part is set in stone with those top heavy guys that we've discussed here on the show. Cortland Sutton, Marvin Mims, Troy Franklin, Levelle Bailey, and obviously Pat Bryant getting involved in the mix here as those primary guys. Everyone else is going to have to chip in and fight for a practice squad spot here, or, do well enough where they go somewhere else. And, it's unfortunate because it's a good problem for Denver to have. So we'll see where things are at here. But day 2 of Broncos minicamp is coming up here today. And obviously you'll get exclusive coverage here, Locked On Broncos. But Broncos Country, we're going to talk about Jaleel McLaughlin, one of the guys who's had a stellar offseason and had a strong day 1 performance during mandatory minicamp. We'll tell you why Jaleel is performing with a massive chip on his shoulder here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
Today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA Finals, they are in full swing. The Pacers and the Thunder. Awesome series so far, and you know that every night is going to deliver highlight-worthy performances, big momentum shifts, can't miss moments, and so much more. Whether it's the game-winning shot or a breakout player, there has never been a better time to get in on the action, and FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. So you can look at player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, and that gives fans more ways than ever to play smart and win big.
Well, with the NBA Finals here, Sayre, you nailed it best, okay? The game's going back to Indiana for Game 3 here tonight, and that means Tyrese Halliburton's looking to show up in a big moment. Right now, the Pacers, they are 5.5-point home underdogs against the Oklahoma City Thunder, and FanDuel is where you can get in on the action and do so today. If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Sean Payton said we shouldn't be making any determinations about the roster just yet, but a couple of running backs, they have stood out already at the Broncos offseason program, and they're about to get a new pal out there on the practice field with J.K. Dobbins entering the fray. But Cody and I were going to tell you why maybe Jaleel McLaughlin is being a little slept on. He's coming out with a bit of a chip on his shoulder here at Broncos minicamp. And Cody, I think this is fascinating for the listeners. It's great timing, especially because J.K. Dobbins is now coming into the mix, and you've got RJ Harvey, high expectations for the rookie second-round pick. It's a great time for Jaleel McLaughlin to have an outstanding offseason program. Well, I'm interested to know what you saw from him out there, because it's going to be big for him to not just, vie for carries with the guys that are already on the, we're going to see J.K. Dobbins out there. We're going to see RJ Harvey out there, but he's got to now fend off Tyler Bede, Audric Estime, and Blake Watson. What are you seeing from Jaleel out there on the practice field?
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing everything that, won Jaleel the roster spot initially when he came in as an undrafted rookie free agent, right? Chip on his shoulder, underdog, springy, in between the tackles, right? And initially when Jaleel was an undrafted rookie at minicamp, you and I were sitting here talking. I was like, hey, keep an eye on this Jaleel McLaughlin guy. I'm seeing that same level of chippiness that he had back then. And look, I think right now it's warranted because he's a guy that Sean Payton clearly trusts, but now you bring in a guy like J.K. Dobbins, who is a veteran back, who's obviously established, has had success, has had some ups and downs when it comes to the injury side of things here. But the Broncos, they made this move, in mind of saying, hey, we need to improve the run game. This is a big area. And obviously there's going to be widespread competition. So we're going to get our first look here today at J.K. Dobbins in a Broncos uniform. We're excited to see that. But for Jaleel McLaughlin, right now, even without pads, this is a guy who's hitting the hole. I think one thing you can say is the vision, for him as a ball carrier is there. And look, there's more balance with how he's running. A lot of times when the Broncos would bring Jaleel in, what runs did you expect? Where was it going, Sayre? Where would you expect Jaleel to run?
Off the tackle, right?
Off the tackle to the outside, counter, things like that. Now we're seeing him run in between the tackles, inside the A gap, and he's patient. And this offensive line, I'm excited when they throw the pads on too, because you get to go against this defensive line. Jaleel is thriving in that, but Jaleel is really thriving so far this offseason, Sayre, as a pass catcher out of the backfield. Last week at OTAs, he caught a long touchdown pass from Bo Nix. During Tuesday's mandatory minicamp practice, he caught a quick pass from Bo Nix, and he zoomed up the sideline with nobody there. I mean, the offense caught the defense in a perfect blitz opportunity, and Bo Nix took advantage. And obviously, Jaleel McLaughlin hit pay dirt there and probably would have hit 21 miles an hour if we were clocking the GPS. So as a pass catcher, we're seeing him be more involved in that department, which is good, right? As this running back room looks to establish some archetypes. As it pertains to the rest of the running back room here, Sayre, I mean, you talk about Audric Estime, RJ Harvey, and Jaleel right now look like the two best backs on the roster. We're going to see JK thrown into the mix here, obviously, today. But just a lot of pressure, in my opinion, on Audric Estime. And I think a lot of pressure on Blake Watson as well, who for the second week in a row was on the side field not participating because he's dealing with some sort of injury that we don't know exactly what it is yet, what the extent of it is. So missed opportunities. What is this saying? You can't make the club from the tub. The addition of J.K. Dobbins certainly, I think, right now puts Blake Watson into perspective. But I think really you look at guys like Sayre Bedinger, who also I thought got involved and had a really solid day as well. I think there's more pressure right now on Audric Estime and Blake Watson than there is Sayre Bedinger, Jaleel McLaughlin, RJ Harvey, and now obviously with J.K. Dobbins in the mix. There's a chance that those could be the four backs on the roster. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go as far as saying I think Denver will keep four running backs on the 53 this upcoming year. And what we think about like with that is how do you make that happen? Well, last year you dedicated an extra spot to the quarterback position. That's probably not going to happen this year. You can allocate that to the running back position or maybe even wide receiver. But I see that being part of the running back equation here for Sean Payton.
I was just going to say, I think what you're saying leads me to believe that you're going to see that extra spot at the running back position for sure. And you know, nothing is certain at this point. And Sean Payton said, you know, to the media, I was listening to his press conference. He's like, you can go ahead and guess all you want, right? And it's half of you are going to be wrong. So, but half of us might be right, Cody. I like to think of myself as on the, you know, glass half full as opposed to the glass half empty. So, but I like the idea of keeping four backs. If Jaleel can be as effective as we saw as a rookie on a per touch basis, we're talking about almost a completely different player, right? We're talking about a completely different player in terms of what he brings to the table with explosiveness, with that big play ability. Last year, it just wasn't the same, right? They tried, and there was some sparks, like the Saints game stands out to me as a game where Jaleel brought some sparks. And I think you could also say maybe that Bengals game as well. He brought it. And so there was a couple of times, but it just wasn't consistent enough based on the amount of touches he was getting. And so if he can bring that to the table again this year, man, he's going to add another wrinkle to the offense because RJ Harvey's not just a change of pace back. He's a featured back type of guy. Jaleel can bring you that change of pace, but he can bring you that different type of guy where, yeah, he's got the home run speed. If he can add that element between the tackles too, it just keeps defenses on their heels. So I really like what the Broncos are building at the running back position.
And look, it's just about figuring out what those roles are going to be. And you mentioned that, like, we go back to the feisty Sean Payton when talking about the running back position because, you know, people are keeping count. And he's like, I know you guys keep count. He said, don't do it. Like, let him play. And I think that's really the one thing we have to do here. We can make our observations and like it's our job in the media to sit and observe what's happening at practice. We're watching it and it's like, all right, we're getting a general idea based on what we see, but could that be smoke and mirrors? I mean, by design, Sean Payton is a guy who is very much a man of mystery. You know, you can get a guy working with the first team offense, you know, maybe a couple times, you know, throughout the week, but then primarily he gets third series reps there. And then what we see from that is, oh, that guy that was getting third series reps, he's actually getting the start on Sunday, so to speak. So there's a lot of mystery with the running back position. And Sean is very much in the boat. And he told us this, that we want to see these guys play. Like, that's the thing he's looking forward to. So I think those first two preseason games, first off against San Francisco, second off against Arizona, those are going to be big. And I feel like every opportunity that these guys get, not so much J.K. Dobbins, not so much RJ Harvey, but more so I think guys like Jaleel, Audric Estime, Sayre Bedinger, we'll see where Blake Watson's at. Every touch that those guys get, I think, is going to be under a little bit of a bigger microscope when it comes to determining how this roster is going to formulate itself at running back specifically, what it will look like. But don't be writing obituaries yet, Broncos country, on any of the running backs out there. This is very much a competition that I think is going to take some time. It's going to take, maybe a little bit deeper into after that second preseason game. Maybe we'll get some finality on it, but it's just a wait and see observation right now. But we are going to have our eyes on running back every step of the way here as Broncos training camp approaches just about 6 weeks from now. Broncos country, we're one step closer to football. Make sure you stay locked in. But let us know your thoughts, obviously, on Jaleel McLaughlin, the Broncos running back room, after the addition now of J.K. Dobbins, how it may shake things up here for Sean Payton. But we're going to go into some day one standouts during Broncos mandatory minicamp, including an undrafted linebacker from last year who made a game-sealing play, or a practice-sealing play, to walk things off here, as there's a linebacker competition that's also going off. We'll highlight Levelle Bailey's big day and more on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
Today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by Skylight. Say goodbye to sticky notes, scribbled plans all over the fridge, and overlapping calendar invites. You know what I'm talking about. And the Skylight calendar is here to bring some clarity to the chaos and help families stay organized without the stress. This sleek digital display syncs with your existing calendars like Google Calendar, Apple, Outlook, and so much more, making it simple to track appointments, practices, dinners, and reminders all in one easy-to-see place.
Well, never miss out on an appointment again. Make sure you put everything into your calendars, and that's where the Skylight calendars come in handy for me. I'm getting married on Monday, Sayre, and the one thing I have there, we had our final vendor bills, so I had those in my Skylight calendar in my house with reminders plus tasks assigned to myself, assigned to my fiance, and we were able to take care of business without the hassle of forgetting something. So thank you to Skylight Calendar for that. And right now, Skylight is offering our listeners $30 off their 15-inch calendars by going to skylightcal.com/NFL. Go to skylightcal.com/NFL for $30 off your 15-inch calendar. That's skylightcal.com/NFL. After the Broncos wrapped up day one of mandatory minicamp, there were several players that stood out on the afternoon, defensively, offensively here. We're going to start things off by focusing on a position that Broncos country has their eye on. That's the inside linebacker position, as Alex Singleton awaits to return to team period stuff at training camp. He's not doing that during mandatory minicamp. A lot of linebackers are getting involved in the mix here. We'll break it all down on today's episode of the show. Sayre, let's talk about Levelle Bailey being one of the key standouts from Tuesday's practice in Dove Valley. In the final team period of the afternoon, was working against the Broncos offense. Jarrett Stidham went to go throw a pass to I can't remember who the intended target was, but Levelle Bailey did a great job. He jumped the route near the sideline, picked it off. That ended practice for the day. I thought the linebackers overall played relatively well during the first practice of the day against not only, the first offense, the second offense, and the third offense. I thought a lot of those guys were making plays. Number 54, I can't even remember his name there. It's not it could be JB Brown, but I couldn't find it on the roster. So I have to double check who number 54 was, because he could have been actually a tryout player, because the roster they gave us, there was no 54 wearing that white jersey on there. So we're very curious to see who it was, because we're like, wait a minute, Alex Forsyth, he's not playing inside linebacker. So we'll get some confirmation for that here today when we go back out to practice. But I thought guys like Jordan Turner, thought Drew Sanders, those guys were making plays at linebacker, especially in the passing game, getting good depth on their dropbacks there. But for Levelle Bailey, a guy who's looking to play a lot of special teams this upcoming season, making plays on defense is a great way to obviously help bolster your strengths and your chances at making the roster.
Yeah, and if memory serves me right, I think Levelle had a number of game-ending big-time plays like that when he was at Fresno State as well. I know for sure he had a couple of game-ending interceptions his final year on campus there. So really intrigued by him, because he kind of has the clutch gene. He came through big time last year in the preseason as well with a big pick six, wasn't it? I can't remember who the opponent was in the preseason.
Cardinals.
Cardinals, yeah. So look, the guy's kind of got a nose for the ball. He's kind of got that ball magnet trait, that some guys just sort of inherently seem to have. And the linebacker position, Cody, to me is one that I know this has nothing to do with minicamp, but man, you see a guy like Jermaine Pratt hit free agency and you're kind of like, ooh, do the Broncos need to go out there and make a move on somebody like that? And, I like the idea of either either or, right? Let the young guys develop in your system if you feel like they can be something. Like if you feel like Levelle Bailey can start for you, let him do it. But if you don't, then go get a guy like Jermaine Pratt. But I'm not opposed by any means to having Levelle Bailey emerge. It doesn't have to be any certain sort of, it has to be this guy at off-ball linebacker. I think that's one of the most open-ended positions right now on the team.
Well, I mean, you're bringing back that meme we were just talking about last week of the guy walking past the girl while holding his other girlfriend's hand. Once again, a linebacker hits there. It's like, oh, Broncos country. There we go. I love it though, man. That's the game. You want to look at every opportunity out there. And obviously the Cincinnati Bengals, that's a mess in and of itself as they release Pratt, who had obviously intercepted Bo Nix last year in that game. Obviously late down the season. That was obviously a big play by him. Make sure you check out Locked On Bengals. You want to know what's going on with their contract situations with Trey Hendrickson and obviously the rookie offensive tackle. Crazy stuff going over there in Cincinnati. But some other guys here as well. We talked about Courtney Jackson early on in the episode, talking about having a couple of catches after he had that one play where his drop pass led to an interception, which obviously was a negative play. He made up for it, caught a touchdown pass. You want to continue to see that bounce back. We highlighted Jaleel McLaughlin, RJ Harvey. Pat Bryant, once again, we talked about the volume of reps in which he got with Levelle Bailey being out of the mix as well. I think that's important for a guy like him because now I think ideally if you're Sean Payton, you're looking at what guys can play similar roles, right? Okay, well, I look at Levelle Bailey. I think to myself, okay, if there's an injury, who could maybe do what Levelle Bailey's role is? Pat Bryant's the perfect guy, I think, for Bailey's role there. For Sutton, though, that's one I don't think the Broncos have a guy on the roster right now that if Sutton were to ever get hurt, they have a guy that can go and play his role and excel at it at the rate in which Sutton does. I don't think they got that guy on roster, but you have guys that can supplement Troy Franklin, Marvin Mims. I mean, I posted on my social media at Cody Roark NFL on Twitter. I posted a clip of those guys going up in the end zone and high pointing it. Evan Ingram getting involved as well. Seemed to be a target that Bo Nix really wanted to throw to during 7-on-7, but there was a guy by the name of Brandon Jones who was kind of erasing some things there, making plays, knocking passes out of the hands of receivers, and also coming up and having some PBUs before a receiver can make a play there. Brandon Jones was another standout, in my opinion, from day one of mandatory minicamp.
Well, and I know you got a chance to ask Sean Payton a little question about the Riley Moss and him coming into his own as a third-year player now, and he mentioned how he's having a good offseason, right? And so I think that kind of speaks maybe some confidence into folks who have been doubting whether or not, he's going to be able to be something. I thought Sean's comments, Cody, were very interesting about Nick Bonito. When he was asked about Nick Bonito's situation and he talked about how they have to be smart with his snap count. Did you make anything of that, or what was your take on that? Were you surprised to kind of hear his response there as well? Because it was like a question about, what does he have to do, I guess, to earn that new contract? And Sean was talking about snap counts and limiting his snap counts. What was your take on that whole situation?
Yeah, part of me was wondering, was Sean speaking in the context of Nick Bonito getting too many snaps during practice, or was he talking about games last year? Because right now I'm pulling it up, obviously, on Pro Football Reference here when we talk about the overall number of snaps played by a guy like Nick Bonito. I mean, the Broncos defense in general, Sayre, we could talk about that final 5-game stretch where the defense, I think in 3 of those 5 games was on the field for 70 to 80 snaps. On a per game basis. They were above the overall, I'd say, average in which they were used to. Nick Bonito last year, according to our friend of Pro Football Reference, he played 708 defensive snaps last year. That was 61%, right? So 61% of your pass rush snaps there at that point. Granted, that's going to factor in some of the games at the beginning of the season where he didn't start. I'm very curious to see if this was a practice comment in terms of snaps because he's not yet signed to an extension, or if this is, hey, like in the regular season, we need to rotate him in or off the field more just so we can get more guys reps and breathing room. I would say the same thing. If we're talking about concern of game snaps and snap counts, we got to talk about Zach Allen as well if we're going to be talking about Nick Bonito.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he's one of the guys who really comes to mind when you talk about maybe playing too many snaps, I think. And he maximized those snaps. There's no doubt. I think he was head and shoulders above every other defensive lineman in terms of quarterback hits. But yeah, I found that comment to be really interesting and kind of eye-opening just in terms of, it wasn't what I was expecting. You expect to kind of just hear let's pump the fluff on this guy a little bit and talk him up a little bit, but it was more of a deal of, hey, let's talk about the snap count being high or borderline too high anyway. So was there anybody, not to put you on the spot, but I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Was there anybody that didn't stand out to you that you were like, I don't know. Why isn't this guy stepping up making plays? Or, you're kind of maybe thinking, hey, it's been a few practices that we've seen now in a row and haven't really seen much from this guy. Is there anybody that comes to your mind in that category?
Audric Estime, I would say here early on, is definitely in that category right now. When you look at other guys getting more involved as of late, I would say it's been really quiet on the tight end front. Guys like Adam Troutman, Lucas Kroll. Lucas Kroll caught a pass today from Bo Nix, but it was nothing like extensive or a big explosive play. The tight end position outside of Evan Ingram has been really quiet. You're continuing to see guys like Caleb Ulner get reps, run blocking, some routes. I think there's some areas of development, for this group that still has to obviously improve and get better, but not as much action for the tight end position outside of Evan Ingram than I thought had. So that was a little bit of a surprising factor to me. And then I'm trying to think of another position, maybe trying to switch it up defensively. There hasn't been anybody that I've been like, they didn't really do much, with the action that they had. I thought Jonah Ellis looked nice. This was the first time we saw him back this week. He was on the side field last week. This week, getting involved in, also some pass coverage. So I like what I'm seeing from Jonah Ellis. All things look good for him and the shoulder injury that he had surgery on. But nothing on defense in terms of guys like, I'm not seeing enough out of these guys here early on. I would say right now it's the offense. It's Audric Estime and the tight end position minus Evan Ingram.
Yeah, and I think it's great to get a positive update on Jonah. He's one guy that I kind of almost forget about a little bit because of Nick Bonito, because of Jonathan Cooper. And then, you brought in Q Robinson in the draft and you've got Andre Tillman and, other guys out there. So I'm glad to hear that Jonah was out there again and looking good because he could be a major factor. I saw somebody, I can't remember if it was a comment that we got on YouTube or somebody shouting us out on Twitter, but they were kind of, of the opinion that maybe Jonah is a guy that could potentially be a reason why the team would move on from Nick Bonito. We don't want to see that, right? I mean, Nick's, he's a Jersey guy, hopefully for this team and somebody that sticks around for a long time. But if Jonah Ellis can be a, more of a factor, he could be a really interesting wrinkle in that whole discussion.
Yeah, and very much to Sean Payton's snap count comment, I'm very curious to see what that really is. Maybe we'll get a follow-up from him tomorrow, but I found it interesting. Jonathan Cooper played 71% of the team's defensive snaps, 820 overall snaps, and obviously he started the beginning of the year, started all 17 games for the Broncos. So part of me is wondering where those numbers are, what Sean Payton means by that. But look, I think in today's NFL, you need, especially at that position, it's different than if you have a guy like Myles Garrett or a Max Crosby. Those guys are outside, wide defensive ends, not necessarily stand-up pass rushers doing what Nick Bonito does, essentially. So I would say that you need more rotation with those guys, obviously, but I think that Denver's got the foundational interior defensive line that's going to have them find success this upcoming season, but you just got to stay healthy, sustain that. Denver's depth is in a very good spot right now. So we'll see what day 2 will bring to the table here in Broncos country. We want to hear from you. What are you hoping to see and hear from day 2 of mandatory minicamp? Who are some players you want to hear a little bit more on? Make sure you let us know on Locked On Broncos. I'll go out there at practice here today and I'll keep my eyes open for you. And we'll recap it as well in a bonus episode later on here today. What better time to be a Broncos fan than right now? You get exclusive content here, courtesy of the Locked On Broncos podcast. Thanks to all the everydayers out there. Thanks for tuning in, making us your first listen. Sayre and myself, we'll be back later for a bonus episode recapping day 2 of mandatory minicamp. We'll see you then.